picture perfect memories scattered all around the floor. Reaching for the phone, 'cause I can't fight it anymore. And I wonder if I ever cross your mind. For me it happens all the time. It's a quarter after one, I'm all alone and I need you now. Said I wouldn't call, but I lost all control and I need you now. And I don't know how I can do without. I just need you now. Another shot of whiskey, can't stop looking at the door. Wishing you'd come sweeping in the way you did before. And I wonder if I ever cross your mind. For me it happens all the time. It's a quarter after one, I'm a little drunk and I need you now. Said I wouldn't call, but I lost all control and I need you now. And I don't know how I can do without. I just need you now. Oh, guess I'd rather hurt than feel nothing at all. It's a quarter after one, I'm all alone and I need you now. And I said I wouldn't call, but I'm a little drunk and I need you now. And I don't know how I can do without. I just need you now. I just need you now. Oh, baby, I need you now. Oh, baby, I need you now.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Matt Dupree's podcast. As we have just closed out Pride last Thursday, a week ago today, we let the Q get away from us. The Q as in queer or questioning. So, queer. She likes the queer term. So we'll go with that. It's this little setup is a little different tonight, so hope you don't mind if we squirm around a little bit. We're trying to get a more comfortable feel to the podcast area. So, and then that's my day bed. That's where I like to sleep. So, hi and welcome, as I said, to Matt Dupree's podcast. I found it appropriate to have brought this up last Thursday at the close of Pride, but like I said, things happened and I was unavailable. Wasn't able to get to it then. So talking about the Q in the Rainbow Alphabet today. I have Deborah DiBiase Dupree here with me to help us understand what that means to our community and how important their journey has been as well, and the many different movements that came about and and also fallbacks that came in this community. Hey, what's up? Is that Sharon? Sharon, how are you? Welcome. Thank you. So that's what we're going to be discussing, the Q in the Rainbow Alphabet. And like I said, it could stand for queer or questioning. The word queer in the 60s or 70s, and even in the 80s, had such a bad stigma to it. Stigma to it. The changing of the uses of the word queer, according to Queer History, Christina B. Hamhart writes, up through the 19th century, the word was primarily used to mark individuals considered odd or outside social norms. By the 90s, there was a reemerge of the term queer. The members of Queer Nation, founded in New York City in 1990, and the producers and readers of what was labeled as queer theory by the next year were by no means the first to affirmatively or wryly reclaim queer, but rather set the word into play that changed the language, the language and the method of both social movements and academic scholarships for years to come, says Hamhart. We have a lot to cover, guys, and as we also get into the series Pose, which we'll dive into that a little bit tonight. We'll dive into more of it as we continue on, and the reason is because Pose takes us into a little bit deeper of a dive into the trans community. So, you know, we're leveling this out where they play a huge part in the queer community, but they also just open doors for the trans community, the drag queen community, and so forth. And we're going to get into all that here in just a second. But what I was saying, Pose found on Amazon Prime Videos. So if you guys didn't see Pose yet, please give it a look. It's an interesting. They say it's a series. I kind of think it's sort of like a little documentary, right? And so I don't, in stereo. That's how we roll. Right, exactly. And then you'll see how all this is going to tie together, bringing to light all the trials and hardships that got us here today. Now, queers in those times, and we're talking the 50s, 60s, so forth, and coming up to the 80s, they didn't want to hear about them. And to the 90s, they resurrected the word and started using it in shining a better light on the word. Now it's more fluid, right? It's easier to hear than it was back in those days. So, but we'll see how they moved us forward, okay? And we're gonna start, and that's the start of the LGBTQ. It should have been first. But before we get into any of this other stuff and all that, let's get straight to the disclaimer. And we'll get it out the way. I, nor Deb, of course, I think she's got she got everyone beat there. But anyway, neither one are psychologists, psychiatrists, or therapists. None of it. Okay, scratch it out. I'm not none of that. However, we are both experts in our own lives, right? For the most part, in the journeys and experiences we throughout our individual journeys and throughout our lives. Today, we hope to give you some understanding of the Q. We will credit where we have found all this information in case you guys want to dive in there and check it out for yourself. Or you just want to dig further into it, we'll let you know. We'll credit as we go. Okay? I forgot where I was. My old buddy Googles. I tell you about him all the time. That's where I get most all my research, and from there I'm able to find where who said what. You'll know. You guys know that already. I do have on a little note, I do have an upcoming podcast with old Googles himself soon enough. So stay tuned for that. But for right now, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Q. So here we go. Let's talk about it.
What about it?
Let's talk to Deborah. Hi, Deborah. It's kind of warm in here all of a sudden. Wore my shirt because I'm usually chilly in the house. But listen, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, well, you know I'm good.
I haven't seen you.
I know. There was no love you. It was straight shower and let's get it together.
Mm-hmm.
So what facts or information you have for us on the Q and queer and questioning?
Okay. So this is taken from an article from Men's Health that they have different people explain what queer means to them. And one quote is, "I use queer because it implies a limitlessness to how and who I love." And this article is by Gigi Engel. And so the word queer is about as divisive as terms come. It took a long time to accept that term in retrospect, in looking at someone themselves, in describing themselves as queer. And as opposed to, a cisgender male or female, or being bisexual, or gay male or female, or lesbian or bisexual. That language is powerful. It can destroy and cause pain, or uplift and validate. And the word queer has long been used as a slur, a word to bring LGBTQIA+ people down and to cause harm. Its first known usage is in this context was during the famous trial of playwright Oscar Wilde, wherein homosexual men were referred to as snob queers. Queer took on a shade of disgrace. It meant something shameful, wrong, disgusting, and ungodly. Basically, being gay made you bad, and queer represented society's hatred. In the 1980s, as activists united during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, the LGBTQIA+ community began to reclaim the word queer. Taking it back signified the defiance and resilience this community had, and still has, in the face of discrimination and violence. It was taken back because it is ours, and ours alone.
Nice, I like that.
And similar to other minorities and disenfranchised groups, that terms that have been used as slang and derogatory are used to empower. And so those among us within the community use it as a form of empowerment. And I know certainly among my own friends and groups growing up, that we would use that term, almost affectionately towards one another, because it was an affirming recognition of one another that we were queer, and that it resounded within each other.
And we say, cheers.
Oh, cheers, queers.
Cheers, queers.
It is the reclamation of the word queer that many of us in the LGBTQIA+ community have found our voices, communities, and comfort in our identities. We are never fixed. We are never stagnant. Human beings are beautifully complex, and being able to own, love, and embrace a word like queer has the power to bring together all of us others.
Others.
The ones who don't fall on the more straightforward, no pun intended, binaries. But each LGBTQIA plus person's relationship with the word queer is unique. Not everyone enjoys or uses the word, and that is perfectly okay. We don't usually need labels to make us feel seen or understood. We decided to give voice to people within the community to tell us exactly what queer means to them. So they kind of compiled different folks, queer folks, and how they wanted to describe that. And in essence, most of them will say it was a derogatory word that they kind of knew and grew up with, and that it embodied something negative, and then the community has taken it unto its own to be something positive and all-inclusive, as both an identity and a way to say that, if you want to sort of label my sexuality or my gender, then this is one way you can do it, if that is something that's comfortable. But also being able to say this is kind of a political statement too.
Now, who was that? The same person that you referenced in the beginning that wrote this
These
stuff?
are all different quotes from different people. So,
Okay.
This is a quote from Miss Toto, who's a drag queen, and says, the word queer embodies the joy I have to explore my sexuality without labels or restraints. While it indicates being outside of the straight label, it feels like an empowering word that gives me safety, freedom, and community. And then
They took it back and they made it positive. See? That's what happened.
Rin Pfeiffer, 49, this is a writer, says, queer is the kaleidoscope umbrella which those of us who are not cisgender and heterosexual stand under. But it means more than that. Queer is counterculture and rebelling against the status quo. Queer is as much explosive joy as it is righteous anger, collective libertarianism, and creative expression. Queer is anything we want it to be. Queer is me. And I love this because about the same age as I am, a couple years difference, it shouts out to the Gen X generation for me, which really embodies a lot of this kind of queer nation. It is a strident, joyful defiance of a social norms that means to dictate who we may love, how we must express our gender, what we may wear, and fundamentally what we can or cannot do with our own bodies. To me, queerness extends to anyone who steps outside traditional norms.
Sorry about the noise in the background.
Mr. Fabulous, creative visionary and keynote speaker. And what's interesting to me about all of this is that, especially since Mo came out as a transgender male, that people started to question me and had interest in how I labeled myself and what that meant. And this gave me, I used to jokingly say, well, I'm Mo-sexual, and that usually shut it down. But more recently, somebody said to me, you confuse me.
Oh no.
And I thought, okay, well, I just am who I am, and this is how I identify if a label is needed, or I guess it was clear to me in that statement that I was seen as outside a kind of paradigm of thought within this kind of LGBTQ community. And not that it was a bad thing that it was said, but it did direct me to say, here's my answer, which is uniquely true for me, is I'm queer. So, so I don't have to say I'm lesbian or I'm gay or I'm this or I'm that or whatever. And if it is, misunderstood or confusing to other people, that's okay. I've always kind of known who I am and who to be. I'm true to myself. And, others had wanted to say to me, well, if you're a lesbian but you're with a transgendered male, aren't you gonna want to, really? So, or that I'm pansexual. Well, that doesn't encompass it either. So queer for me represents the best identity for who I am and how I have been in my life.
There you go. So again, I apologize the dogs again. I'm going to have to start keeping them out the door and closed because it is disruptive, and my apologies for that. Thank you, Deborah. That was a lot of information that you put out there about what you've come to research and to read. And I think it is great that, what was derogatory, what was used to hurt us, was finally embraced and turned opposite, right? They turned it back to the positive to say, hey, wait, okay, I'm queer and I'm proud. So to be able to take something away from those who's throwing that rock at you and say, hey, I'm not going to throw the rock back at you. Instead, I'm going to throw a piece of cotton ball or something because I'm going to lighten the blow. It's not going to hurt me. So this word now, this term, has been embraced by the community. And
well,
it
that's
doesn't
where you see the convergence of the political and social stance of the use of the word, where it dismantles those harmful, destructive parts when you utilize it to empower, and basically disarming those that use it. So okay, so now you got to come up with something else, I guess. But
right, and I'm sure they're working. They always working it out because hate's always going to try to find its way out. But it's love that wins. I say this all the time. Love's always going to win because, it's in every culture and community that things that are said derogatory to use to hurt someone against some persons or, for whatever their race or gender or whatever.
Yeah, and I can't say that I would have experienced it as a triple minority. So as a woman, there are plenty of words that are used as derogatory terms for women, but I can't say that I've experienced the same terminology as an empowerment. Whether it's the B word or the C word or whatever it may be, but I can't say that I've had the same experience. Even culturally speaking, that even though some derogatory terms within culture have been used against me, and that I've used within my own community as an empowered name or speech, I can't say it has the same power that queer has transformed into.
That's right.
So it has that uniqueness to it.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the movie, or as we kind of or series. We kind of look at it as more of a documentary. It documents a time and a place, and we're going to touch on the queer aspect of it, and then how it started bringing things out. We didn't even know this world existed. As we lived above it, we didn't know it existed around us. And
well, we were younger then,
right,
and not.
This was in the 80s. We're talking
early
about
80s, yeah, late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
Yeah. In Brooklyn,
New York. Yeah. So the scene is the queer trans community basically like we talked about a little bit on Stonewall, only not like, sorta, kinda, but not really. It had the same take, right? It had the same take on. They had to be underground. They couldn't be visible. They couldn't, be seen. They were set apart. So they had, in order for them to mingle and to be able to be themselves, they would have what they called a ballroom, a ball. I'm trying to think. They would host these balls where they would dress up into their trans selves or even queer selves, for the more masculine of the queer folks back in those times. So they would go to this ball and they had a DJ, and then they would they would kind of dance or show off what, best costume or
categories.
Yeah, by categories. And so that brought on the whole this is before drag queens, so we're gonna this kind of takes us into how that became or came to be. So
in that time, so you're thinking there wasn't a social community, there wasn't a bar community, there wasn't today we know certain bars and certain communities and neighborhoods are the gayborhood, and this might have been considered like a gayborhood, and that created their own kind of sub community where they could live with one another and also build their community, and also part of the social life was this ballroom, and where they were able to express themselves in many, many different creative ways, music, movement, dance, and with their own artistic flair of, different costumes within those categories, and dress and wear. And so through that came that emergence of the transgender community, which gave birth to the drag queen community. Right. So given the real high population of homelessness, and amongst that community, that houses were kind of developed as people needed to live with one another,
and the reason for a lot of the homelessness, especially with the younger generation, is because as they were coming out and they were figuring out their life and who they were, their authentic true selves, their families were not having it, and so they either had to change or leave, and the families wanted nothing to do with them, so they were forced out into the streets at young ages. And so these ball moms, as they call them, right, or house mothers.
Well, there was a house mother for each of these homes that where different groups of the community would live, and it was a designed family and culture amongst its own, similar like we find our own definition of family and culture within our own social groups. But they relied on one another. They provided an income. They, so the socioeconomics of the home, and I would say Pose is, it's a kind of a documentary series based on real people and based on real events.
Correct. In that particular, what we're talking about, Pose, they casted this unique group of people as they are. Basically, these people are who they are. So they found that to be a unique challenge and a uniqueness that they brought to this series, to have real, true queer, LGBT, and then the trans into this, the making of Pose. So that by itself is worth checking out, because you see the people as is and nothing hidden, and they speak their truth, and they are unique in their own way. So a wonderful put together documentary series that we really enjoyed watching together. Now Marty, hi Marty, and welcome my brother. Marty says Pose hit it right on the money. You're right. I am glad I had a chance to experience that era. I was a DJ for over 20 years and had my time in the 80s. What does that say?
DJing in the Bronx
In
and Spanish Harlem. We had house mothers and house contests once a month to see whose house ruled the club culture at the time. I felt I was back in time watching this show. 85% of the show is accurate. It is where I learned so much about myself thanks to them.
That's beautiful testimony now from my brother right there, Marty.
And it was fascinating to watch, not having been part of that culture, but to be introduced to it and to see alongside the layer of, the HIV AIDS epidemic as well. But so each house competed against one another for different titles and for trophies. And, another documentary that we watched, which is Paris is Burning, also talked about how, when you look at society during that time, and the things that were popularized were things like the show Dynasty, and then there's ultra wealth and affluence. And so, this community was replicating the same kind of feeling that all others were feeling watching those shows, to want to be like those individuals, to have that wealth, prestige. And what was interesting in the ballrooms was they had categories called realness, and that was a category described as trying to fit in, to acclimate. And for the folks that won that category were the ones who assimilated the best, or looked
more
not gay, not queer, not, and that they represented, sort of the mainstream. And if you can remember what the 80s looked like, it was a gratuitous time of greed and overconsumption. So,
oh damn.
But there's even one scene in Pose where a transgender female goes into a gay male bar, and is beaten and removed. And so you can just even see at that time that there was angst among the community there of really not understanding or embracing or supporting the transgender community. And then the other part of Pose also talks about the sex industry and how a lot of the transgender community made their living that way.
So in my research, I'm sorry, my screen's way far away, so we're gonna talk a little bit about what was going on in those times, right? We've already been addressing some of that. We were misunderstood. The LGBTQIA plus community was misunderstood, and we were cast aside. Nobody wanted to know about it. Nobody wanted to deal with it. They didn't want to see or hear from you. Keep it to yourself. As we have spoken about earlier on during Pride Month, when we touched on the L and we touched on the B and then the T, this community didn't have it any easier. As a matter of fact,
No.
a lot of these people in earlier times were arrested. They were incarcerated, thrown in jail for being gay, for being queer, for having the sexual, even the sexual acts, what was going on in their own home, in their own life. They couldn't even live their own life because it was under the watchful eyes of the police or whatever, the authorities, and it was a disgrace. That's what it was labeled, a disgrace. Lock them up. So imagine our lives today and how different it is from even just 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and even less. Let's go 20 years. There's, what was happening, and what's fascinated is because in my research, and Deborah was like, well, that's about the UK or Europe.
But it's replicated in every other
But it's right. So
community.
we're not just talking about the queers of the U.S. We're talking about queers, period,
Well,
everywhere.
that's because queers are everywhere.
They're gay everywhere. They're just not here. They just didn't. The United States just didn't make them.
Ubiquitous. Look that one up.
Make our people. Sorry.
Well, again, you go back to who would choose this kind of life. That if you were transgendered in the 80s and, the way you made your income was in the sex industry, which was, could be quite a brutal,
So, and saying all that, I did want to, everything's a loud cookie. So I did check out this, it's called Peter Tatchell Foundation. The 1980s, a decade of state-sanctioned homophobia. We all know that. Open season on queers by state, church, tabloids, and police. So listen here. London, right? Not here. But you're going to hear how everything has the domino effect, right? It's got to start from somewhere. London, Bishopsgate Institute, blog 7 November 2012. So this is where you want to research if you're going to go. So the Peter Tatchell, director of his own foundation, recalls the abuse of the LGBT human rights in Britain during the 80s. Okay, my buddy Googles all this. I just gave you the info. The 80s were a period of intensified homophobia, sanctioned from the top election of society, the government, I don't know the word, church, police, and tabloids. It was open season on queers. Imagine that. I mean, just think about that. Like I think about deer season, right? Open season. You just got your license, go for it. So when I hear this, my mind just goes to that. Open season on queers. We're human beings, people. Anyway, that upsets me. That's why I get so upset right there. Open season on them. Okay. Then it says, the conservative government of Margaret Thatcher was at war with the LGBT community. She launched a series of homophobic and sexist moral crusades under the themes of family values and Victorian values. That's in their place. Labor councils that supported local LGBT communities with funding and the use of council premises for events were denounced by the Tories. And I don't know what the Tories is. I didn't get into. Do you know what the Tories is? I think it's kind of like they're political people, Probably the police. I don't know.
Keep going.
The LGBT, I'll get it though, and I'll figure it out. And if you know in the meanwhile,
Well,
let
now
us know.
you should know.
Right. The LGBT community became a political football. Homophobia was stirred up and exploited by the conservatives. They appealed to the bigoted vote and won it. On top of all this, the AIDS epidemic was demonized as the gay plague. It was manipulated to blame and vilify LGBT people and to justify increasing homophobic repression. The Chief Constable of Manchester, James Anderton, abused gay people as swirling around in a cesspit of their own making. Police operations and arrests intensified. At the 1987 Tory Party conference, Thatcher attacked the right to be LGBT, suggesting there were no such right. The following year, her government legislated the notorious Section 28, which banned the so-called promotion of homosexuality by local authorities, leading many authorities to impose self-censorship to avoid prosecution. By 1989, that wasn't that long ago, the number of gay and bisexual men convicted of consenting same-sex behavior was almost as great as in 1954 to 1955, when male homosexuality was totally illegal, and when the country was gripped by the McCarthyite anti-gay witch hunt. Unexpectedly, this homophobic repression was making the LGBT community in Britain. It mobilized people as never before. In 1988, London Pride Parade was double what it had been in previous years. It increased to 30,000 marchers. 30,000. Imagine that parade. All day, 12 hours. Act Up London, Stonewall, and Outrage explode into existence and began a successful fight back that led to a rapid decline in arrests for consenting homosexual behavior, and a decade later to the wave of LGBT law reform from 1999 to 2010. It proved to be the biggest, fastest, most successful law reform campaign in Britain's history. But it is worth remembering the criminalization of homosexuality in the UK was only finally ended in 2003, not that long ago, with the legislation of the first sexuality neutral and non-discriminatory sexual offenses code. The queer category of unnatural offenses was scrapped.
Unnatural offenses.
The 1533 law against boogery.
Boogery.
Buggery.
Buggery? Is that buggery? That sounds like a British term.
Buggery
Boogery.
was finally repealed,
Boogery.
as was the gross indecency. Now my face is red, right?
Indecency.
Statute that sent Oscar Wilde to prison in 1895. These extraordinary reforms, as the result of the stupendous collective efforts by tens of thousands of LGBT people and our straight allies. That's right. Campaigning gets results. Bravo. And let me tell you guys, that right there sums it up. We cannot do this, one of us. Everyone wants change, but no one wants to come together on that. They're too busy. There are more important things to do. But they want to sit back in the sidelines and push you out there. You go do it. I want you to go out there and do this. I want rights.
Part of that is fear, though. I mean, you know.
Of course.
But the other part is, you know, that, you know, to come out and to be, you know, politically like that is a huge risk for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we can't do this without without the allies, you know, and that's the strongest motivational foundation, I think, behind all of this, is that it's, you know, whether it's our moms, our brothers, our sisters, or whomever it is that are there, you know, advocating for us, you know, that's where the power is. But when I hear this, I remember, you know, being in the 80s and being in high school and everything, and you know, it was if you heard queer or faggot, then that was something to be really scared of. And I would say I would agree that homophobia was something that was normalized, and gay bashing was normalized, and you know, it was a pretty scary time. And then of course when HIV came out, then it was even more scary to be out. And
well, you know, in society, all itself, no matter what it is, you have certain levels of fear, right? Depends on the neighborhood you walk around in, you know, or you're near, close to. There's a fear of certain whatever's going on there. You know, I know myself being a kid, fear was always pushed into us about, be careful where you go. You know, this happened there. You know, don't go down this. So, and as we get older and our lifestyles, and then now we can focus on, well, we've all, if you're gay, straight, or any of the LGBTQIA, the coming out in itself was feared. We're scared. We don't want to lose the people we love. But then once you do, and then that person becomes your,
ally.
If they are, and believe me, there's been some who's, I'm done. You know, they may not say it to your face, but you probably don't hear from them very much, if ever at all, once that truth is out. So, and until something happens in their life and down the road, then they calling you, hey, or they're trying to find you, hey, I have someone in my family who's this, and thought maybe you could help me understand. Well, now you want to understand, but you know, you didn't really care. But sometimes it takes that impact to change people. And I know for me, in my life, in my situation, coming out twice, not once.
You show off.
But twice. Neither time was easy, and both times were very scary and fearful. I think this last time I wasn't as concerned because I had thought I had such a great relationship with my family, and I thought I had their support no matter what. And there's times that, you know, they're kind of on the fence about it, to be honest with you. And what's funny to me is they would rather, you know, they could accept me as a lesbian, right? That I'm not, and I wasn't, but that's what I knew, so that's what I had to be. But they just have a hard time with the trans part. So I gotta give them that. I understand. I have, you know, I don't have all the answers, you know, and I can't
Well, but it gets back to this definition of gay, queer, which is it's all inclusive and it's really just about who you love. And if people can get past, you know, all the other things that continue to be obstacles for them, and figuring out like, you know, like when I came out, also like now you're a lesbian, like
Right.
why does it always have to be so negative and have to be, you know, this construct of so you're this, so therefore, and this formula? Well, queer totally takes away that formula and just says love who you love, and if you love me, you know, as a daughter or sister, then it makes sense to be able to understand that I just love who I love, and that's doesn't seem to be a difficult thing.
And love is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has, you know, I've told people this in the past, even when I was younger. It's not something you could see, right? It's love isn't something that just comes in your face and say, hey, my name's love. It's not something you can feel unless you feel it here. It's an emotion. You can't hold it, touch
But
it.
you can
like,
see it between people.
You could see it between people. But it's not a person, place, or thing. It's not something that says, I am just this. I am just straight. I am just man and woman. I am just white or black or Mexican or Latino. I am just, no. Love is an emotion. It's what we feel. Just like sorrow and everything else. So when people try to dictate who you should love, or you should be with, or you should have in your life, they're missing the point. The fact is, love is an emotion. And love is when two people are connected by it. It connects you. That's when you know this is right. Because that emotion is in her pulling me, or in me drawing her. So that's, you know, and so to take away, to try to tell someone who they should love and what they should do, where they can or cannot be, is just insane. You know, why? Who makes you the one to put that law into place? Who are you to tell us who we can and cannot love? So,
Well, that comes back to who holds the power and control in your society, right?
right.
So,
And oh boy, that's a whole other can of worms.
but queer is just as diverse, if you could make the parallel to if you were to say Latino. So, I mean, you know, to me, you know, being Latino doesn't mean everyone who's Latino is from Mexico, right?
Right.
So, I mean, everybody who's queer is not, you know, bisexual or cis or anything else, that it is that diversified. And amongst it has all the different dialect and language and culture and fashion and music and everything else that defines, you know, within that one term. And so, or even if you were to say, you know, indigenous, that encompasses a whole variety and diversity of people. So it's not very clearly defined in one solid thing.
That's right. So we've talked about some of Pose, and then we're covering some of the era, and we just told you the social issues in the 80s, but we do have a couple more things to hit on, and this is Google's got me to theatlantic.com. So what this is a glimpse into the 70s gay activism, a remarkable, frank examination of LGBT issues during the transformative decade between Stonewall and AIDS. This is by Rebecca J. Rosen. This article is the 11th in a series featuring clips of the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is working to digest television and radio pieces so that they may preserve for years to come. And the 1960s came to a close with what is still perhaps the most consequential event in recent American gay history, the Stonewall riots of June 28, 1969. We just talked about that. As Charles Kaiser put it in his History of Gay New York, no other civil rights movement in America ever had such an improbable unveiling, an urban riot sparked by drag queens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But while many gay people remained ignorant of Stonewall, the others reacted to it with discomfort. This 1960s version of the Boston Tea Party would do more than any other event to transform gay life in America. The thick bottle that had contained an entire culture was uncorked in 1969. Within a few years, it would be shattered into thousands of pieces. Those years that followed the decade of the 1970s represent a remarkable period of transformation for gays and lesbians, particularly those living in America's coastal cities. At its core, that transformation was about visibility. Still is. Still true today. During those years, there was the first gay television movie, a sexy on-screen kiss between two men in Sunday, Blood Sunday, and the release of Cabaret, which has been hailed as the first movie that really celebrated homosexuality. There were great gains in politics too. Edward Koch, then serving in Congress, became one of the first elected officials to publicly lobby on behalf of homosexuals of Greenwich Village. Greenwich. Kaiser writes, Gay Pride Week was established, perhaps most significantly, in December of 1973. The board of the American Psychiatric Association voted 13-0 to remove homosexuality from its list of psychiatric disorders. That's a win, because they thought that you had to have some loose wiring up in the noggin to be gay or queer or any of this. But that was not true. Perhaps inspired by these changes, in 1976, New York's public television station WNET, today known as Channel 13, featured a live 3-hour special called Outreach, Lesbians and Gay, capitalizing theirs, right? A small clip has been provided to the Atlantic, so it's in there if you want to read, as part of our series on the history of public media. Though some of the language may induce cringing on the part of viewers today, has a homosexual experience. In the context of the 1970s, this special represented a remarkable, frank, and sympathetic conversation. It may not have been right on the cutting edge of gay and lesbian activism, but it wasn't trailing too far behind either. As Kaiser told me over email, any discussion of anything gay on television was still pretty rare then. So there's much, much more you could get into and dive into if you read, go to Google's and go to theatlantic.com. So that brought into the 70s. So we just talked about the 80s, and then we just talked about visibility. So as we're getting ready to close it out, we talked about the drag queens, and we're gonna touch back on Pose just a little bit more to talk about how that brought into the drag queens of our times today. Because as we were talking about Pose was a ball gathering where they would dress up, and they had categories in which they would have the nicest outfit or dress or whatever costume, and some just had whatever that theme was. Had to they would not fight, but compete house to house for who would get the biggest trophy. Well, as the time had gone on, and you'll see in Pose, they started singing and doing their little walk up the aisle, if you will.
Lip syncing.
And then lip syncing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that brought on the lip syncing, and it was Madonna's song. They wanted to do that dance to one of her famous songs, that Vogue. So it was Vogue.
Well, Vogue. No, the term Vogue originates in this ballroom culture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
Actually, it's the other way. It's the other way around, where that term is used and demonstrated within the ballroom culture of Vogue and part of how they dance, and
thanks for clarifying. I'm sorry.
In their artistic expression. And so when Vogue comes out, and even to the point where classes were taught at like the Y as to how to Vogue and things like that, and then when Madonna comes out with this song, they say we're on the map, and that we're being recognized, we're visible now, and that that desire to be seen, to be famous, to be known, to to be recognized, that if a pop culture artist who had status like that was to know them,
right.
So she adopted that from their culture.
Right. Okay, so that was good for clarifying that for me, because I don't know, I guess in watching the actual movie, and as they were doing their dance, that song came up, so I don't know if I got it twisted. I'm glad Deborah was able to...
She replicated it from, the experience of being in the ballroom.
Right. So beautiful, beautiful series. I really encourage you guys to watch it. Now, on the other side of Pose, and what I did learn about, that Pose came out post the Eagle, what was that other? The Paris is Burning. So Deborah and I watched that documentary, and that was pretty interesting. I don't think I took as much away from that. Of course, it was a small little documentary. I don't think I took as much away from it as I did Pose, but I get how they kind of meshed them or linked them, because it was all about the same time. And so Pose had more. I think they dove in it a whole lot more and made it so much clearer for the viewer to understand the struggles. Although you do see it in Paris is Burning.
Well, again, Paris is Burning was the platform and foundation for the series Pose. That you can see the same.
Oh wait.
The same people represented in Pose that are in the documentary.
Right, but again, like I said, it was small. I didn't get a whole lot from that, other than it was similar, but Pose actually lays out a nice format to follow, simple to follow and understand, and to appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you get a sense of the house mothers and the culture and the dynamics and the strife within the communities, and again, and then, you know, living and surviving through HIV and AIDS and dying, you know, that their community was dying through those times, and how they sustained that, and how they became more and more politically charged and organized around that effort.
You know, and HIV was named the gay plague, and it was named the black plague. It was named several plagues, or the black cancer. So the gay cancer, the plague, and they called it the black whatever. But it was HIV, and they put it to the gay community. It's a gay man's disease. Well, and then in the 80s, right at the end, in 85 or 86, when Rock Hudson and all these famous actors, you know, had contracted HIV, and then, as you guys saw in the other one, it wasn't until, and then that little boy, that young, and then it made them open their eyes.
Magic Johnson was another.
Right. And we all knew someone. I knew a couple of people who had contracted HIV, and you know, one was a roommate of mine, and ended up with full-blown AIDS. And I remember back in about 89 him telling me about it, and then he went to some research in Texas, and he did AIDS research. And in doing that, I guess he was on medication, which was in the trial time, and he started getting healthier, and things started changing in a positive way for him. So good for him. I have lost touch with him in all these many years, and all I do is pray that he's still okay and thriving in life.
Well, and just a comment on that, which is, you know, there's quite a few of us who have been tested, and if you've been in that situation, that you know, when you watch Pose and you really feel the enormity of that, and how it was in those moments. And I went with my queer friend, and we were terrified. And again, you know, another politically stigmatized disease, and you know, we both tested negative, but that we both were counseled after that, that we were there for a reason because of our behavior, and that we, at that time, we knew how it was transmitted, and that people still weren't having, you know, safe sex or taking precautions. And, you know, we had to go through a whole educational series, you know, based on a change in behavior and lifestyle. So, you know, and that, you know, was pervasive regardless of gender and your identity, you know. So that's pretty harsh hitting when you remember sitting in those waiting rooms. But what's interesting there is just the chasm that it makes, that if people can think about the only other socially politicized virus has been COVID. And, you know, HIV is where we got universal precautions, and no other epidemic until, you know, COVID was something that we looked at how we responded to, and how much we learned during HIV.
That's right. So guys, we hope we were able to bring some good clarity to you and understanding, and to see that, you know, we had triumphs, we had setbacks, and that's in every walk of life, but especially in this walk. These walks, the LGBTQIA community is a hard life to live, and hard to navigate through, because we have society who kind of tries to stop you at every corner of the way. So there are triumphs every day. We see them. Even if it's a small stride, a small move forward, it's still a move in the right direction. So that's what I focus on. And with these podcasts, I intend to bring clarity and understanding to those who may not have that understanding or may not had the opportunity to research it or to know someone. I was having a conversation just today with someone and said almost everyone, I would say the vast majority of people walking, living, breathing today knows someone or someone of someone they know who is part of this rainbow community. And if they don't, they soon will. So it's important. Knowledge is power. And knowledge helps us to grow and gain that understanding so that we're not blocked. Take the block out. We're people. We're all human. Above all, we're all human. And we're all here to do the same thing, to live and enjoy what life has to offer each one of us. No matter what your sexual preference is, no matter what you identify as, no matter who you were born to, what group or culture you were born in, no matter what, we are all here to live and enjoy life. It would be great to be able to live and enjoy life and coexist together with everyone happily, without the fights and without having referees pulling us from one area to the other, from one spot to the next. These people are like this, stay away from them. This person's like this, we're people, right? Not one of us, not anyone I know is perfect. Not even myself, other than Google's might be. He's a little off too sometimes. But we're going to talk to him in a couple weeks. So with the setbacks and the triumphs, celebrate the triumphs. And when we have a setback, figure out what that setback is and how we can personally make it better going forward for those coming behind us. Because that's what we're here to do. We're in our 50s. It's time to keep going forward. We talked about all these things, and I hope we brought some clarity to you people. That's all we want to do is bring understanding. That's right, without hate. Right. Michelle, you're absolutely right.
And I have to remind myself of that too, because there are times when I can feel that anger inside me against, something that's happening and or another person, and to be really mindful that that's just a regeneration of negative anger and replication. And so to be able to do that different in the same way as we arm ourselves with things that have been hateful towards us, but that we don't kind of magnify it by keeping it going.
Truth. And really it's to know, and sometimes it takes a lot to take a step back to say, whoa, somebody comes at you hard or in a way that makes you uncomfortable or you get upset. But think for one moment, I can control me right here. I know what my struggle is. I know mine right now, what's happening right now. I don't know what yours is. I don't know what you're facing right now in this moment. So if I step back and think, whoa, somebody coming at me hard, something's wrong, right? This is on them. I'm not going to own this for them. I'm going to let them spill it out, and I'm going to be okay, I'll let it go, move away. Because I know I can control that. I can control me. I can't take on whatever they're going through. I don't know it. So if we just stop for a moment and think, whoa, this isn't like this person to come at me like this, or something's wrong with them. So I'm going to stand back here because they're going through a struggle. So give others a little courtesy and give them a little grace to say, hey, you know what? I'm here, man. I'm sorry, whatever. and just let them get whatever is in there out and just get out the way. Okay? We can control that about ourselves. We have that kind of control to say, I can only own what I'm feeling right now. And I know may not be perfect today, but it's better than what the hell this person's going through. So I'm going to stand out their way and let them move on through, because it's not worth it. It's not worth it, folks, to have hatred. Hatred builds. Let it go.
Speak with integrity.
And words in action. Say what you mean and mean what you say.
And don't take it personally.
And don't take it personally. You know, visibility, here we are. Here we all are, right? When I speak of our community, I also speak of our allies. And our allies are also visible. And they're right there standing with us. A lot of the times, they're pushing those floodgates open for us. So please, never discount them, because they are at the forefront of our missions in life.
Well, often those allied people are in,
Big positions.
right. They have, they're in situations that, privileged situations.
And be kind, I say it all the time. Because we don't know what power that person that we're trying to push away has or may have, and the impact that they have or may have on our community or on us, right? So don't discount anyone. Everyone's important. So, with all this said, we are so thankful that you all have taken the time out of your life today to come and spend with us and to gain a little more understanding and insight on the Q in the Rainbow Alphabet for queer, and for those
Or queen.
or queen or questioning.
Or
I don't know why they'd be questioning. They already know, but that kind of whatever. So we are thankful to have such great support from all you folks. And I know it is late on Chicago's time, so thank you, Marty, Michelle, for being here. Sharon, thank you so much for showing up. Drew, I know you've been here. I'm not sure if you're still here. Much love to you guys. Thank you again, and stay tuned Saturday. It's a big one. I will give you just one word. I think it's a two-worder. Or acronym. DV. So it's going to be real, folks. Love you guys too. Hey, it will be real and raw on Saturday. Please stay tuned. I've dug so deep into this. Lots is going to be said, and we're going to go through. So please show up. I'll put it in comments, or I'll do a small little podcast on what day and time. Saturday for sure. Not sure the time yet. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, be good, be kind, right? And you have a great rest of the week. Tomorrow's Friday. Friday fuckery.
Night.
Fun and fuckery.
Just got paid.
I'm Mo. This is Happy Deb dancing. And it's, we thank you. And we are out.
I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive. I'm just out to find the better part of me. I'm more than a bird, I'm more than a plane, I'm more than some pretty face beside a train. It's not easy to be me. I wish that I could cry, fall upon my knees, home I'll never see. It may sound absurd, but don't be naive. Even heroes have the right to bleed. I may be disturbed, but won't you concede? Even heroes have the right to dream. It's not easy to be me. Up, up and away, away from me. Well, it's alright. You can all sleep sound tonight. I'm not crazy or anything. I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive. Men weren't meant to ride with clowns between their knees. I'm only a man in a silly red sheet, digging for kryptonite on this one-way street. Only a man in a funny red sheet, looking for special things inside of me, inside of me, inside of me, inside of me, inside of me. It's not easy to be